Rachel's going to start her Torah shiur. Rachel, you there?
Morning, everybody.
We can't hear you well.
Should I talk soft or should I talk louder? What should I do?
Oh, you're good. Yeah, you're good now.
Do you hear me now?
A little, yeah, let me hear.
Okay.
No, it's a little too low. A little bit louder.
Okay, do you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. So just welcome everybody. And again, I just want to say how an amazing group this is. And I don't have the chance to listen to everybody every day because I have to go teach. But every once in a while, I do get a chance. And the power of the women is really mind-boggling. And Rabbi Yosef said many, many years ago that based on the Torah, obviously, that women are going to bring the Gula. And really it comes from learning. And the more we learn, the more we're able to attain the wisdom. And the Chachma leads to Das, which is the concept of connecting. And when we connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to ourselves, everybody else, then we're able to bring the ultimate Geula. Rav Hutner asks a question, why do we not say Havdalah on Purim? That's a very interesting question that he asks, because why Dafka Purim? Because Purim is really a yontif. It's a yontif that encompasses all the other Yom Tovim. It's a yontif that encompasses the Pei is Pesach, the concept of redemption, Sukkot, which is the Vav is Sukkot, of the Tzel of the Shechina, of the clouds of Hashem. The Reish is Rosh Hashanah, the Yud is Yom Kippur, atonement, and Mem is Matan Torah, when the Yid and the Jews said, Kimu v'Kiblu. So he said that really on Purim, it encompasses all the Yom Tovim, and we should really make Havdalah at the end of the day because it's a yontif. So he answers that the reason we don't say Havdalah is because the message of Purim has to carry us through the next few weeks and up until Pesach. It's very similar to why did the Kohen Gadol wear bells on his coat? He wore bells on his coat so that when he left the room, the bells rang, and everybody who was outside would hear the clinging of the bells. What did that represent? That whatever the Kohen Gadol did had a lasting effect. It's like when you go into a perfume store, you don't buy perfume, but you walk out and you smell perfume. That's why it says by Dayenu, if I would have only come to Har Sinai, if you would have just taken me to Har Sinai and not given me the Torah, it would have been enough. Why? Because the lasting effect of Har Sinai would have just remained. So he answers that the reason we don't say Havdalah is because Purim's not over. The message of Purim is not over. We don't stop Purim and then there's a lull and then we go into Pesach. You know, we may stop Yom Kippur, Sukkot, and then there's a lull, we go into Hanukkah, but not when it comes to this. This is a continuation. And we continue the messages of Purim. We have the Shabbos Para. After that, we have Shabbos HaChodesh. Then we have Shabbos HaGadol, and then we have Pesach. And that is the preparation. So today what we're going to do is we're going to concentrate a little bit on the messages of Parshas Para, which is this Shabbos. And we're going to try to understand how this is the bridge between Purim and Pesach, how it is our preparation, and what the message is. So we all understand, I'm going to explain to everybody in a few minutes what exactly Para Aduma is. It was a very unusual event, and it's in Parshas Chukas, and it starts, the pasuk says, Zos Chukas HaTorah. This is the chok of a Torah. Now, in Judaism, we have chukim and mishpatim. We have mishpatim that we more or less understand the reason, and then we have chukim which we don't understand. We don't understand the why, but we're able to try to figure out the what, which is what the Meforshim do. They try to give us the tam of the mitzvah, the taste of the mitzvah, meaning you may not understand why, and you may look at it and it just makes absolutely no sense to you, but you could delve into what the message is. Well, what is the message? The message of Para Aduma is that it is a chok. Zos chukas haTorah. This is a chok, and you're not going to understand it. And you're not going to be able to understand the elements in it. And you're not going to understand the process. and you're not going to understand why I gave it to you. You may understand the messages, but you're not going to understand. And what is he trying to say? We already learned that by Mara, before Matan Torah, when the waters were bitter, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Moshe Rabbeinu, taught them 3 mitzvos before Matan Torah. What were they? Shabbos, Kibbut Avim, and Paraduma. Because God was trying to tell them that in order for you to accept the Torah and to be my nation, you're going to have to understand that there are things that you are not going to understand, which I once said, the greatest chachma is to say, I don't know. That's what the man was about. Man who? That's the first thing. Chukas Torah. Chok comes from the word ches, kuf, kuf, to be engraved in our hearts. That concept that I don't understand it all, and I won't understand it all, is engraved in the essence of man through the Torah. Torah comes from the word mora. That's what it teaches us. That in order for me to be Mekayim the Torah and to be able to absorb the life of the Torah, I have to understand that I'm not going to understand everything. It doesn't mean we shouldn't search for understanding the meaning. It means, of course, we should, because the depth of the meaning connects me even more, but we don't do it because I understand it. In other words, I don't say, oh, I don't do that because I don't really get it. I don't do that because I don't really understand it. No, Zos Chukas Torah is, you do it because you don't understand it, because you don't get it. You do it because you align yourself with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. So what is this process and what is the message besides that message of Chukas HaTorah? So we have this process of a person who becomes contaminated by a dead body. It's called Tumas Hames. This was probably the first time that Tumas Hames was actually put into the process. I'm not going to go into Kabbalistic points here, but Tumas Hames only happens when the Malach HaMaves comes down to take the person. Later on by Mashiach, if there will be death, it'll only be by Neshika of Hashem, by the kiss of Hashem, and then there will be no more Tumas Hames. But I'm not going to go into that right now. So we have a very peculiar event. They go and they take this cow. This cow has to be, it's called a para aduma. It has to be red, completely red. It can't have more than 1 or 2 other color black threads. It has to be tamim. It has to be perfect, no blemish. It cannot have lo aleha ol. It cannot have on it any yoke. It could not have done any kind of work. And Elazar HaKohen is the one that will take care of it. And what they do is they burn it, and the ashes are put away for this process. And the ashes are, dipped into the water, and then they take a eitz erez, they take a eitz ezov, they take a hyssop tree and a cedar wood, they dip it inside, and they sprinkle it onto the person who came in contact with the dead body. What's very interesting, though, is that in this process, somebody else takes over and he becomes tameh too. So the person who shechs the animal, he becomes tameh. He has to wait a few days, go into the mikvah, immerse his body and his clothes, and then he's tahor. The person who takes the ashes, that's what happens to him as well. The person who sprinkles it, that's what happens as well. So it's this cycle that doesn't seem to end. And that is exactly what we don't really understand. Now, what happens is that Rashi starts off by saying, in a very harsh way, Zos chukas Torah, gzeira hi milfanai, this is a decree, ve'ein lecha rishus laharir achareha, and you're not allowed to question it. But at the end, all of a sudden, Rashi seems to soften up and change his mind, and he starts giving us a little bit of a taste or a tam or a reason to maybe pacify us and to explain to us what it's really about. So he starts to tell us that the paraduma is there to be mechaper for Chet Egel, which is so interesting because this is this week's Parsha, Kisisa. Because Rashi says, the Egel, the baby calf, she makes a mess. Let the mother come and clean it up. Let the mother, who's the para, come and clean it up. So the mother has to be, the para has to be tamim, because Bnei Israel were tamim, were perfect before the Chet. It has to be red, because red is a sign of averos, of sin. Lo aleha le'ol, it cannot have a yoke, because the Yidden, when they did Chet Egel, took away the yoke of Malchus Shemayim from themselves when they worshipped the Egel. Okay, Elazar Cohen, because of course Aaron couldn't do it because he was part of it. So that's a very simplistic understanding of what it is, and I'm going to come back to that to that concept of why Rashi changes his mind all of a sudden. There's a medrash that tells us, I hope I remember this, that a non-Jew came to Rav Yochanan and asked him about this process. And he says, you know, I heard that you Jews do this and this and this.
Rochel, unmute, sorry.
Isn't that a form of sorcery? So he answers in a very simple way. He says, well, what do you do? What do you people do when you have, mental illness? And he says, oh, we take herbs, we burn it in the fire, and we sprinkle it on the people. He says, okay, so we do the same thing. And the non-Jew went away. So his Talmidim looked at him and he said, Rebbe, what was that? What was that answer? You when we asked you, you didn't give us an answer like that. And he said, that's right. For him, I had to give him the most simplistic answer for him to understand on his level. For you, I have to tell you the truth. The truth is, it's not the cow. It's not the para that purifies. It's not the dead person that contaminates. It's none of that. It's Hashem. It's all Hashem. Hashem is the one that brings the tahara. Hashem is the one that brings the tumah. That's the truth. So what happens over here? What is tumah and what is tahara? Once we understand what tumah and tahara is, then we can understand what the message of para aduma is. The chok of para aduma is the idea of transformation. The chok of para aduma is the idea of bringing back the guf and the neshama. What is tumah? Tumah is a loss of life. A loss of life is when the guf and the neshama now become detached. That's it. There is no, what is life? Life is the connection between the guf and the neshama. Death is the nituk. It's the disconnect. Most sources of tumah result from death or the loss of potential life. Death is the ultimate loss of the ability to exercise free will. So it's the loss of the opportunity of spiritual growth in the world. Para aduma has the ability to renew that kesher, to elevate the lower worlds and combine and to unite them to the higher worlds. Para aduma has the ability to transform, to connect it, to take the tumah and to transform it into tahara. We see in the pasuk something very interesting. It says, "V'lakchu l'tamei me afar sreifas ha'esh hachatatz v'natan alav mayim chayim." That he has to take the dust and put it into the water. What dust? There was no dust. It was afer. It was ashes. Afer is with an aleph. Afar is with an ayin. What is that? So we know Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch always switches the letters. When you burnt the cow, there were ashes. Why would the pasuk say afar with an ayin? That means dust, earth. Because the whole essence of this para aduma was this concept. Afar is dust. It's the earth. It has no form, but it could lead to tzmicha. It could lead to growth. You can plant in it. Something can be produced. Afer has no form. It came from something, but it doesn't have the ability to grow anything at all. So Hashem is saying, from the koach tahara, from the strength of purifying this paraduma, the afer can turn into afar. The ashes can turn into dust. When it's joined with the water. The water is mayim chayim. What is mayim chayim? Mayim chayim is the Torah. Torah does that. It gives us the ability to transform the afer into afar. What caused the Bnei Israel to sin by the Egel in this week's Parsha? Something very interesting. They looked at themselves as just plain old afar and afer. That's it. Smallness, littleness, maybe ashes, maybe just dust, maybe with no potential. Who are we? We're going to need a leader. We can't come to Shem. We can't talk to God. We can't do this. We can't approach them. They weren't asking for another God. They were asking for someone to help them, a mediator, because they didn't see in themselves any kind of greatness. And that was their mistake. They didn't understand that they could take the afer and turn it into afar. So when Torah is engraved into our hearts, understanding that we can plant and we can build and we can create and we can transform, and we take that tree, that cedar that ate Ezov and Erez, again, the tree, and we dip it into that water, the tree, which is the root. We go back to the source. We understand the chokapara aduma. We understand that we've got that ability to switch things around. Para comes from the word pei reish. Pei reish is a shorish for many things that mean separation. Parua in this week's Parsha, to be exposed. Paruk all, to release yourself from the yoke of Malchut Shemayim. Hifrid, to separate. But the paraduma comes to teach us that we can bring it back together again. Purim is the same. Pur is a goral. The goral was there to separate all the elements, all the units. But in the end, it was nahafachu. We took it and we transformed it. Paraduma is actually a beautiful message. It's a message of hope. It's a message that we can do it. It's about not taking the Ra and eliminating the Ra. It's taking the Ra and transforming it to Tov. It's about connecting again the Guf and the Neshama. What is water? What's with the water? Those people that were in the process went into the mikvah. They immersed themselves and their clothing. Water is a process of growth. We know that from the time when God created man, right before he created man, we see that there's a pasuk that says a mist rose from the earth, and then Hashem blew into man's nostrils nishmas chayim. He was formed only after water entered the picture. Water was there before. There was darkness, but it says Rochel kimmer chafetz al pneiha mayim. Water is in the womb. The womb is in the water. The baby's in the water. Water is the concept of spiritual cleaning. Water is everything. It's ultimately, it is the combination of spiritual fulfillment where you can actually transform yourself through water. The mikvah is 40 seos, the measurements of 40 seos, in order to show us that we have the ability to transform ourselves in the water. Water is the building block. Water is Torah. That is the concept. When I take the concept of the afar, of the afer, and I understand that I can turn it into afar, by throwing it into the water which has the ability to give me life, because the water is the Torah. That's the chuk. That's the chuk of paraduma. The concept is engraved, it's etched in my essence. The concept of growth, of development, of understanding who I am, the connection between my guf and my neshama, being able to transform the afer into the afar by rectifying the perud. And that's a continuation of Purim towards Pesach, so that when I begin my preparations, I go into Parsha HaChodesh, and then I can renew myself. And then I go into Pesach, where I can sit by the table and I can actually feel the Geula. The difference between Galus and Geula is the Aleph. The Aleph is one. The one is the unification of the Guf and the Neshama, bringing it all together. But I'm going to tell you something else that I heard that's really actually very beautiful. The Sefer Chinuch gives us a little bit of a lesson. He says to us, if you are trying to work on a specific midah, it says, Acharei ha'pu'ulos nimshachos acharei levavos. If you're trying to work on a specific midah, you have to start to do things that reflect that midah, no matter how hard it is for you, and hopefully it'll lead you to that midah. You just keep working on it and working on it. Hashem gave us the paraduma for a reason. Hashem understood there was going to be something in our lives, throughout our lives, that the kind of concept of the paraduma, that we're not going to understand things. There's going to be situations in our lives we're not going to get it. There's going to be trials and tribulations, and we're going to lift up our hands and say, why? We're not going to understand it. There are situations in our lives, it's called chukas hachayim, the decrees of life, where we're just not going to get it. So in order to get accustomed to the idea that we don't have to understand everything, and we're not going to understand everything, he gives us this chuk. What's interesting is, where does he put this chuk when he teaches it to us? In the Shulchan Aruch, it's under Hilchas Tumas Ames. Why? Because when a person confronts death, when it's so hard to understand, Hashem says, see, look, now you have a chukas olam. Now you have something that you don't understand. So I'm going to give you a chukas Torah so that you can get used to the idea that you don't have answers to everything. And you'll never have answers to everything. There's a story in the Gemara that brings down that actually the Magen Avraham and the Shulchan Aruch, that there was the time when they burnt all those Sfarim. I know we say it in the Kinnis, it was a very, very bad time for the Yiddim in those days. And the Chachamim thought that maybe it was called the Shelas Cholim, they would dream, and in their dream, they would try to get answers from above as to what they should do. So they put themselves to sleep and they asked in a cholim, in a dream, what should they do? What's going on here? Why did the Svarim get burnt? Why did the non-Jews do this to us? What's going on here? And the answer was very interesting. The answer was in Aramaic. It was da gzeros araisa. That's a translation to zos chukas haTorah. That was the answer in the Shelos HaCholim. So they understood that was a decree that they weren't going to understand. So they decided that they had to do something. So they decided to establish a fast day on that day. What day was that? It was Erev Shabbos Parshas Chukas, because they understood that was the chuk. So now I'm going to go back to the Rashi. At first, Rashi says, Gzeirahi milfanai. At first he says, it's a decree and you're never going to understand it, so don't even ask the question. Later on, what does he do? He starts to pacify and to give us answers. Rav Asher Weiss says, a chuk is something that on the surface may not make sense. But later, maybe when you look back, all of a sudden makes sense. It's the same idea when HaKadosh Baruch Hu was asked, Moshe asked him, can I see your face? Hashem says, no. Panai lo yare'eyu. But you can see my back. Meaning what? You'll never understand. But sometimes when we look back, we go, oh, that's what happened probably with Rashi. Rashi says in the beginning, don't ask. It's a gzeira. It's a decree. Remember, this paraduma was commanded before Chet Egel. But then Chet Egel came. And all of a sudden, Rashi says to himself, oh, now it makes sense. Maybe we need life experiences to see and appreciate and understand what that chok was all about. Panai lo yare'eyu. But my back you'll be able to see. In this week's Parsha, the Yiddim do what they shouldn't be doing, and they worship the Egel. And there's 3 punishments that they get. And one of them is that the Leviim had to get up with their swords and they had to kill their brothers. Moshe stands up and he says, Mila Hashem Elai. Those are the 3 words that we hear resonates in Hanukkah. That's really the 3 words that equals Zos Chukas Torah. Mila Hashem Elai. Who is with me? Who is with Hashem? Come with me. That's the chok. That's engraved in the essence of who I am. When I am aligned completely with Hashem's will, and I understand that I can't understand everything, I have the ability to come with Hashem, to be with Hashem, to transform myself and everybody around me. And that's my prep. That's my prep for the upcoming weeks. So when we sit by the table and we sit by the Seder, we're actually able to feel that Aleph that's in the Gimel Lamed Hey, and to unite our guf with our neshama, to unite ourselves with everybody around us, with the Kodesh Baruch Hu. May we all be zoche to actually not see the paraduma. We don't really want to see that, but to see the Mashiach and the base of Mikdash, we'll be able to serve Hashem the way we're supposed to serve Hashem. By the way, I just want to add something very beautiful. You said something about the Noam Elimelech. The Noam Elimelech says something very, very interesting in this week's Parsha. It's such a coincidence. He says, if you take a look at the first few words, he says, it's really talking to us. Yeah. I'm gonna say it very quickly. I had found it at the last minute. He says, if you look at the first few words, it's really talking to us. He says, "V'yiklu lecha." Each one of us has to take the concept of the paraduma, which is tamima. Tamima means to be tamim, right? To be without blemish. Asher ein bamum, that we have no blemish. Asher lo aleha ol, that we don't take upon ourselves any other ol except for ol malchus shemayim. Anybody who's interested, it's on the Sefer Noam Elimelech al Torah. Everybody have a wonderful day. Have a great Shabbos. Enjoy your preparations for Pesach, and do it b'simcha, because that's actually very special and very meaningful, and it could be very uplifting. Take care.